Hello all, welcome to the network pen testing series at Pentester Academy. Now in this video, we will continue with pen testing Windows endpoints, and in this case we are going to look at something interesting, which is anti-forensics. Now as a pen tester, a lot of times your work probably may extend over a couple of weeks. And the last thing you would want is for the admin or the security team to basically know that you're up to something and go ahead and probably mitigate all the attacks you're doing as well as the ones you're planning. Now, this is where anti-forensics comes in, and this is a way by which we will ensure that it is difficult for an incident responser, a forensic investigator, or a security auditor to go ahead and recreate what you have done. Now, anti-forensics itself is a very wide topic, and we will take up some interesting things which I have found to be a bit unconventional when I have seen these discussions happen. Now, the first of which is the Windows Prefetch folder. So what is the Prefetch folder? So what Windows wants to do is to speed up the process of booting, loading applications and all of that. And this is where whenever you go ahead and run an application, Windows creates an entry for it in a prefetch folder. Now this entry contains all the different DLLs and other files the application is known to load in the first 10 seconds. Now, this data is used later to speed things up. I'll explain how in just a bit. Now, the Windows Prefetch folder is located under C drive Windows Prefetch. And how does it work? So, as I mentioned, the OS observes the application for the first 10 seconds and then creates a file. And the convention for that file name is the application name hyphen a hash of the absolute path .pf for prefetch. Now this prefetch file contains a lot of data. Most importantly, the names of DLLs and other files along with their paths which are loaded by the app in the first 10 seconds. Now how is this used? Well, the task scheduler periodically goes ahead and parses the prefetch directory to understand all of those important files which are typically used during application boot up of the most common apps which are run on your system. It then creates a new file called layout.ini which contains the list of all of these common files which need to be loaded very fast. Now this layout.ini in turn is used periodically by the defrag utility to go ahead and put all of these files really on the disk as adjacent to each other as possible so that the read time is very less and we do not lose a lot of time in actually spinning around the disk and reading data from sectors which might be very far from each other. Now this is how the prefetch directory works, and if you think about it, this is just fantastic because it allows us to load applications faster. Now the prefetch isn't only concerned with apps, it is also concerned with boot, and there are files in which when the system itself is booting, all of those different instrumentation parameters are put in so that Windows can probably speed things up even during boot time. Now, as you can imagine, this prefetch directory is a treasure trove for forensics. An incident responder, a forensic investigator can easily reconstruct the applications which were run, their last run times, and even the order in which the apps were run using the prefetch directory. Now keep in mind the prefetch directory has no correlation with the event logs, so you can delete the event logs uh, and the prefetch directory still remains untouched. Also, here's the more interesting part, it doesn't even have a correlation with if the executable which was run exists later or not. Now what I mean by this is, let's say the attacker downloads his toolkit, runs different binaries from that toolkit and then deletes it. Even then, prefetch entries for each of those tools continue to exist. Now, as you can imagine, this can be very worrisome from a pen tester's perspective. So let's go ahead and inspect the prefetch folder. So this is a Windows 8 machine, and if you go to C drive Windows, you will actually find a directory called prefetch. Now once you go into this directory, you are going to see a lot of these pf files, and if you notice, it's basically the file name hyphen followed by a hash, which, as I mentioned, is a hash of the absolute path. You can scroll down, you'll see a ton of these files in this directory. Right? There are some other files here as well which start with AG. These are really what are called superfetch files. So these files actually allow Windows to predictively decide what could be the next couple of files you're about to load based on your use of the system, the time on the day, and a lot of other things. Anyway, in this video we are concerned with just the prefetch files, which end with the extension pf. Now, as you can see, it's probably useless to inspect the files like this. If you open these up in WordPad, unfortunately, this contains binary data. You may be able to locate some text in there, but really not anything you would be able to just view and understand. Now, this is where we need a utility to go ahead and view all of this prefetch data to understand it better. Now, the best utility I could find was WinPrefetch from Nersoft, and this has both a 32 and a 64-bit version. So please download the one depending on your OS. Now, you can go ahead and open WinPrefetch after you download it. Hit a quick refresh, and you will find this huge listing of the prefetch file, the created time of the entry, the modified time, the file size, the process exe responsible, the path of the binary. The run counter is really the number of times this exe has run, and the last run is the last time it was run, right? So you can clearly see, if you sort things by run counter, you can get a good idea about what runs the most, right? This said search filter host, probably assuming this is the search toolbar or something, right? When we do a Windows button S or use any of the other search functionalities. Let's go ahead and look at this as last run time. Here we are, right? Now, as you can imagine, a forensic investigator or an incident responder can look at the last run time, correlate that with the created time, look at the run counter, and can understand which binaries ran. You can clearly locate the name of the binary and also the path if it still exists on the system, right? Here is the path. Now, even though as a pen tester you might delete the binary, these entries end up remaining, right? So let's prove that. So here is my prefetch directory. So I'm on live.sysinternals.com. Let me download one of these sysinternals tools. Let's say psinfo. Let's download it and save it. Open the downloads folder so you can see psinfo. If I go back to my prefetch directory, right now there isn't any entry for this. Let me go back here. Let's now run psinfo. It ran, of course, we didn't give it any arguments or anything. Now if I go back here and do a refresh, there you go. If you notice, I see an entry for psinfo, right? And this basically allows me to immediately see that this tool was run, and I can verify that with WinPrefetch view as well. Here you go. And if you notice, it clearly says psinfo has run on the system. It gives me a run count of 2 because I had downloaded this before as well, just to test it out, right? You can probably try downloading some other utility, maybe let's say Process Explorer. I probably think I have most of these on my system and I may have run them before, but it's worth a shot. Yeah, I think I've run them before, but let's see if it's in my prefetch directory. Let's go back here to a refresh. There we go. It says run count is 1. Now keep in mind, there are a maximum number of entries which are actually allowed in the prefetch directory, after which the newest one overwrites the oldest one, right? I don't remember the exact count. You can Google that online. And I think it varies between different versions of Windows, with probably Windows 8 having a higher limit. So this is worrisome. And let's actually go ahead and sort by last run time. I think we already are sorting by it. So here is my Process Explorer entry. Now if I go back here and even if I delete both of these two, do a refresh, go back to the prefetch folder, you will actually see that the entry for psinfo and Process Explorer still continues to exist, right? We could refresh here and you will still see that it continues to exist, even though C drive users administrator downloads Process Explorer does not exist anymore, right? Physically on the disk. We've deleted it. So this is really where there is a huge problem, right? Now also notice something interesting. We are able to locate the list of loaded DLLs. Now this can be worrisome as well. If you recall, in a previous demo, we had looked at DLL hijacking. Now imagine if we had run Adobe Reader, to go ahead and escalate our privileges, then the prefetch folder would contain an entry for the Adobe Reader, and that would contain our DLL, which might clearly look totally out of the way, right? Totally different than what is expected. And this includes the place where we did DLL forwarding and all of that as well, right? So clearly this is a worrisome amount of information. In many networks, admins might regularly pull all of this info to a central location so that they can run their different forensics tools or any of the other tools just to understand which applications are running on the user system, right? So which means this could be synced remotely using PowerShell scripts and whatnot. And this is where it is important for an attacker to ensure that he does not get logged in the prefetch directory. Now, in the next video, we will go ahead and look at different ways by which you can disable the prefetch process. So that's all I had in mind for this video. If you're enjoying your time at Pentester Academy, please do recommend us to your friends and colleagues in the InfoSec community. Thank you. Hello all. Welcome to the Pentesting Windows Endpoint series at Pentester Academy. Now in this video, we will continue with looking at the Windows Prefetch measure and how it is possible to do anti-forensics by disabling it. So in the last video, we explored why the prefetch directory is a treasure trove for forensic investigators and why as a pen tester you do not want to leave remnants there because it might show up immediately to an admin who processes the prefetch folder or even an SIEM product or something which might pull that and look for anomalies. So how do we beat this? Well, you basically have the option of disabling prefetch temporarily using a registry key setting, and after that you can go ahead, run your commands, create your files, do whatever you like, and once you're done you can enable prefetch again just so that things do not look out of place. So let's look at how we can do this. So I'm going to go back to my Windows 8 machine and let me open up the registry. So the setting in question, if I were to kind of take you through, is under H key local machine system current control set control, and as we scroll down under session manager and then further under memory management, and then you have prefetch parameters. Now the two interesting parameters for us is enable prefetch and enable superfetch. So let's try and understand what these are. So the value is currently set to 3 and there are really 4 possible options for both enable prefetch and enable superfetch. The first is 0, which is disabled, which is probably what interests us. The second option is 1. In this case, application prefetching is enabled, but boot time prefetching is disabled. The next option is 2, in which the boot time prefetching is enabled and application prefetching is disabled. And finally 3, where both of them are enabled. So now let's go back to our Windows machine. So let's try out this experiment. I'm going to go ahead and go to the prefetch directory. So here are all the files. You can clearly see regedit has already shown up. Now let me go ahead and run some commands just to ensure that prefetch is running as expected. I'm going to open up the command prompt and just do ping google.com. Right, ping times out immediately. But if I do a refresh on this folder, I can already see my command.exe and ping show up. Right. Now let's go back to the registry and let's go ahead and set enable prefetcher to 0. Let's hit OK. I'm going to close the command prompt and let me go ahead and clear these top 3 entries. Now let's do the process again. We go back, refresh, and if you notice, no more prefetch entries are being added. Fantastic. Great. Similarly, we can even disable superfetch by setting it to 0. Let me actually set this back to 3 again. And if you notice, it's completely runtime, right? There is no reboot or anything of the system required, which is great from a pen tester's perspective. I've enabled it. Let's hit ping. And there we go. We can see ping showing up, right? This is great from a pen tester's perspective because we can disable this once, of course, we have the required privileges to change the registry. And after that, we can enable it before leaving the system. Now, let's go ahead and look at the superfetch option. So one option, of course, is here. The other thing is superfetch runs as a service. And let's open up services. And let's scroll down and locate superfetch. Here it is. And basically, we can go ahead and disable this. We can stop it, right? The service name itself is called sysmain. And this would completely disable the superfetch service. Fantastic. So this is really how we can play with the different registry parameters for prefetch and ensure that it can be disabled. A good task, of course, is if you've just gone ahead and managed to break into a system, is to ensure that all your prefetch artifacts and superfetch artifacts are removed. So it might be a good idea just to delete all the entries in this directory. Keep in mind that might raise some alarm at times, depending on how the admin might have set up the collection of these prefetch entries and how he processes them. But the easiest thing, of course, is to delete the most recent entries which were caused because of the breaking in, if at all, and then to disable the prefetch service and enable it before you leave the system. Fantastic. So hope you guys enjoyed this video, and before I finish, just some more things about superfetch. As I mentioned, this is really more of a predictive algorithm to look at what different commands, DLLs, etc. probably can be loaded up in advance in anticipation of the user or some service utilizing it. The superfetch can also be disabled. Unfortunately, there are no good tools available like the one we saw for the prefetch in the case of superfetch. There is a blog post here on rewolf.pl. This gentleman had released a rudimentary tool, I think a couple of years back, but unfortunately it doesn't seem to work when I tried it with Windows 8. So anyway, as I said, as a pen tester, from our perspective, it's more important to eliminate this info. When we probably look at incident response or forensics of any kind, at that point it would be more interesting as to what these files contain and how we can string together a full attack based on the data we uncover within these files. So have a look at your prefetch directories and the superfetch service and the registry and all of that, and try it out. And if you're enjoying your time at Pentester Academy, then please do recommend us to your friends and colleagues in the InfoSec community. Thank you. Hello all. Welcome to the Pen Testing Windows Endpoints series at Pen Tester Academy. Now, in the last two videos, we've understood the concept of Windows Prefetch, why it is important, and manually how we can go ahead and disable Windows Prefetch or the Superfetch service. Now in this video, let's look at it entirely from a pen tester's perspective who has broken into the machine and now would like to do all of this remotely. So the first thing we are going to do is go ahead and gather information from the prefetch directory so that if required, we can understand the most common programs the user runs. Now to do this, we are going to use the post module Windows gather nm prefetch. The prerequisites, as you probably can imagine, is we already have a shell on the box which can manipulate these registry entries, so preferably admin. Now that we have Meterpreter, let's go ahead and background this session and then do a use post Windows gather num prefetch. If you do a show options, you'll actually see it's the session. You can set it to 5. In my case, I just tested this before, so it's already set. Now let's just hit exploit or preferably run. So now this is gathering information from the prefetch directory. Let's wait for it to complete. Now keep in mind, much of this actually you could do manually as well by downloading the entire prefetch directory or by using other tools to set the registry keys. I think prefetch is one of those places where probably most pen testers end up overlooking. I've seen a lot of blog posts and books talk about the event logs and deleting of the event logs, but not about other forensic evidence like the prefetch directory. Okay, fantastic. So as we can clearly see, Metasploit seems to even have a little parser which can parse the prefetch directory and give us all of these details, such as the last execution time, the run count, which clearly seems to have a problem. The hash, I think they've swapped both of these. This might probably be the hash and this is the run count. File name, file path. So here is a bug which you can probably report. And at the very end, we also have all of this in the form of a text file, which we can then look at. Right? So this is great because if I quickly look at this, I can actually see that the user has been playing around with AVG. Seems quite common, right? Of course, a couple of these could also be started automatically, but we can clearly see the AV seems to be very, very active on the system. We seem to have probably Python installed. We have BadBlue installed. Java seems to be installed, right? So all of this information can be interesting and in many cases give clues to what is being run on the system, right? If you see an IIS web server or something like that, which is being started and stopped, etc. Now the next step is going to be to look at the registry settings and to go ahead and query that data and even to modify it. So to do that, let me jump back into my Meterpreter session. And I'm going to use the reg command. So this is basically command followed by options. Let's actually first do an enum key. So I'm going to do a reg enum key -k, and now let's take this key, h key local machine. Could use this as hklm. Then we have system current control set, system current control set, and then control session manager, control session manager, and then we have memory management. I think there is a space in between. So we have memory management, followed by prefetch parameters. So now we have prefetch parameters, right? Hopefully there are no typos. Okay, great. So this actually tells us that really we have 5 things under that: boot ID, base time, enable superfetch, and enable prefetcher. Let's look at the value, the current value of enable prefetcher, right? And this can actually be done by using query val. So I can go back in here. Display didn't get updated, but hopefully there it is. So we have -v, which basically is enable There we go. The current value is 3, which means everything is enabled, both application and boot. Now let's actually go ahead and change it, right, to, let's say, 0. So we can use set val. So here is set val. It's already mentioned the -d here to 0. Then change this to set val. There we go. Now we can verify this again by probably looking at the query val, and we see that this has been set to 0. Fantastic. Which means Windows Prefetch is now disabled. Let's set it back again to 3 so that we can enable it. There we go. We have enabled it once again. Fantastic. So this is how, as a pen tester, remotely you can query the cache. You can inspect the current value, whether it's enabled or disabled, and then you can disable it while you're working on different things on the system, and then enable it back, right? And you can even check the prefetch cache just in case you feel probably something was logged which you did not want. Fantastic. So hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you have, please do recommend Pen Tester Academy to your friends and colleagues in the InfoSec community. Thank you.